Hey, listen, I got a job for you. Look, we're bringing life to the new world.
What the fuck?
And the best damn part about it is, we're gonna make a whole lot of money.
So, Harry's doing kids now.
Jack, you do not want to mess with these men, I'm telling you.
It's $50,000. Watch it for me, okay?
You know, I've been thinking. Been like dreaming.
Stick to the plan, Jack.
I said, can I help you?
Yes. You can help me.
You know what's wrong with this country? It's you! So she's gonna be okay then?
Stick to the plan.
So, hello everybody, it's Ben here from Spirit of Independence Film Festival, and I'm absolutely delighted to be joined stateside with, I guess, the Bruiser crew, if you like. So we've got John Mark, the director, we've got Josh, producer, we've got Dustin, who plays Jackie, the lead character. So, guys, if I could just come to each of you first, just so we can get to know you a bit. So, Dustin, if I could start with you, just tell us a bit, obviously, about your role in Bruiser and your connection to it, and just a brief bit about yourself as well.
Sure, yeah. I guess I'm from Florida originally, and then I spent a lot of time in Chicago acting in the theater and independent film scene there. And about 5 years ago, started teaching at Western Carolina University, which is where John, Mark, and Josh teach. And I was teaching there for a few years, and now I've moved to South Carolina. But while I was there, we sort of would find I was a crossover professor teaching in both the theater acting side and the within the film program, teaching on camera acting. So I would do a lot of things like sort of guide casting decisions for young filmmakers and help sort of bridge that gap between theater and film in various ways, you know, explaining to theater people how film sets work and vice versa. And, you know, when we all came together and wanted to do a project that included students and included the program, but ultimately the three of us, John, Mark, Josh, and myself, really wanted to do something together. So we just, you know, we spent a weekend at a rental house on a mountain and started writing the script and having conversations about this film, and with me as the lead actor in mind from really the beginning, because we thought maybe we could just, you know, save on resources by building around what we have. You know, John Mark is director, Josh is a screenwriter, and me as an actor. So that's sort of how this all started.
And it's that's that true indie ethos of knowing your resources and using them appropriately. So, John Mark, if you want to kind of tell us about almost, and Josh as well as producer, how do you start pulling this together? Where do you kind of think, and we'll get into Bruiser in a bit, but one of the things I was quite amazed about with the film was all the different locations that you had. You know, these aren't locations you see in a normal kind of micro budget indie film. So just tell us about the logistics of kind of pulling the resources together. So Josh, if we just come to you.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well, as Dustin alluded to, you know, we started working backwards. So we looked at our community, and this, we'll get into it later, I think, but actually we had a really unique approach with the community on this project, and thought about our community and thought about including our community, not just as resource providers so that we can make a film, but actually as participants, investors, co-producers, you know, and found a lot of people who wanted to join up and do something fun together. We tried to really honor that commitment from people from the community. And through that, we were able to get a lot of fantastic, you know, props and locations and camera cars and things like that. So yeah, that motel like is 10 minutes from my house. So the nursery is a friend of a friend, and he's a sweetheart of a guy, and just open the doors, and we live in Western North Carolina, so people are pretty warm and friendly, and we really benefited from that ethos.
So, John Mark, if we would just bring you in here as well, then. Now you're talking about using the kind of community and that side of things. Was there anything that you found sort of problematic with that side of, with kind of managing and directing all of that?
Well, I guess one of the things that I wanted to point out was that I was in my first year at Western Carolina when Josh and Dustin had the idea, and the idea originally was to make a movie. And so I think sometimes you find the project and sometimes the project finds you. And Josh said we were working backwards. And so I think actually originally the film we were going to make was about a brother-sister demon hunter team. that was like the original idea, and Dustin was going to play a guy named Jasper, and that was like the first little nuggets that we had. And so we began pooling our resources together, and the story is something that came later. I don't know how we went from demon hunter to to where we got, but the idea originally was not to make Bruiser. The idea was to make an independent film using as many available resources as we could pool together. And so there was one point early on in pre-production where we realized that we could get this junkyard that it really does look like something from a movie. It's pretty breathtaking, even though it's junk. But we knew that we could use that as a location and we could get it for very cheap. And so we had to find place for that in the story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
I think a lot of times we were working backwards and realizing we can get this and we can get it cheaply and it'll give us a huge amount of production value. How do we bake that in to the project and make it work?
The airport is another great example of that.
But do you guys remember when we decided to put, like, it was like a series of phone calls where we were just all mind explosion moments when we decided to put it at a motel? We were like, this scene can be at the motel and this scene can be at the motel and this scene. And like, we were so excited when we had that discovery. We didn't initially write it in a motel.
Right.
But it came around.
Right. Yeah. We've all been around the block enough to understand how difficult it is to have a bazillion locations. So we wanted to have the production value that sort of feels like a whole lot of locations without having to do a whole bunch of company moves all the time,
Yeah, it's really interesting you saying that about the location, and it sounds like it all came together pretty organically. I've always, when I have been working with students, one of the things I've always said is almost like find your location or find your character and write your story around that, especially when you're working with a low budget income source. You've got to use what's available. And sometimes it can be stumbling across something like a location, writing the story around that. And because it's about harnessing those cinematic tropes that you can find within it. Mm-hmm. So you find all these locations. How did you end up kind of shaping the story of Bruiser then off the back of this kind of organic process you're going through?
Yeah, well, as John Mark said, we started far afield from where we ended. And we basically started to simplify, but also we had I had developed kind of a practice of working together with multiple people that I wanted us to use, and we did, and it worked great. One of my favorite parts of the whole process, if not my favorite part of the whole process, was writing the screenplay together. So we started out with like what we called a retreat, and it was like a 2 or 3 day weekend that we spent at a cabin with no cell service, which isn't hard to find around here. It's only like 20 minutes away. But and then we kind of used some very specific processes to find the spine. And then we would each write scenes. So I would dole out scenes and say, Dustin, you take this, John Mark, you take this, I'll take this. And then I'd get it back and rewrite. And most of the scenes got rewritten, but some of them didn't. There's a couple scenes in there that Dustin wrote verbatim, and they're the same as he wrote them, and same with John Mark. And so we really worked together. I was kind of the captain of the ship, but we all did a lot of writing, tons of writing. And actually the toughest part probably was at the end when I got some notes back and realized that I had to do some structural work on it because I was on another project out of the country. And so I had to kind of quickly drop everything and fix some stuff. And that was just like 3 weeks before production. So that was tough, but it was the right thing to do. And we all knew it. So it was a very organic process. It was kind of like going down a spiral staircase where you keep going over the same material and it gets a little tighter, a little better, a little closer to ground floor. And then you finally get there, you know?
So I remember specifically Dustin had written our wings scene. If you haven't seen the film, that doesn't mean anything to you. Yeah. When you do see the film, it does mean something to you. But that scene with the wings, that was like a midnight email that went out on like a Monday evening. And Dustin was like, I've written this scene. I think it's pretty good. Take a look. And I mean, what he sent out that night is what's in the movie. He just came up with that idea and we stuck it in.
Popped it in there.
Yeah. And that for me was probably one of the real early scenes where you get the proper human side of Jackie come out. It's funny you saying that because that scene, because I watched it again just 2 nights ago, and that scene really stuck with me. So, Dustin, in relation to writing about a character, and I presume at this point you know you're going to be playing Jackie, how difficult or easy is it to write for a character that ultimately you know you're going to be playing, and how difficult or easy is it to have someone else writing those lines for you?
Well, what's beautiful about this process that we created, I have to give Josh credit for sort of managing what the process looked like. I mean, he really laid it out for us. So John Mark and I both understood what that process would be like. And it wasn't a lot of pressure. It wasn't like every word Jack said I had to write or something. You know what I mean? It was kind of like, well, if you have an impulse and it's within the world of who you, Dustin, think Jack is, then go for it. And and Josh will put the final touch on it or whatever, or John Mark will take the scene or, whatever needs to happen until it's right or it feels right to everybody. But it was amazing. I mean, it's like, you do it to some extent. Most indie films I've been on set as an actor, I think most recently a feature called Luke and Joe by Josh Oberbay. There's like a certain amount of like writing your own lines here and there to sort of make a character or a moment or any sort of the world of the thing work for you. And most indie directors will be down for that and like cool with you coming up with those ideas. But we just started that process way early. I mean, I feel like it almost feels like there's no other way to make an indie film. It's like every lead actor should be in the writer's room, because especially if they're patient and they listen and they try to keep their ego out of the space as much as possible and just let it be about like, let's find the best version of the story, So It was awesome. I loved it.
Something that one of the things that Russell, I think, always comes back to is the process of discovery. The process itself should always be leading you to new discoveries. And so whenever you feel like you've got your thumb on it, that can actually be something to worry about a little bit if you're totally in control of it. And so something that I know that I discovered is that the scenes with Jack, they always had to come back through Dustin. That always had to filter through. And Dustin is a very strange actor because he's the only actor I've ever worked with who will cut a line and he'll say, this is extra, and I think that I can do it physically. And so let's cut this out. No, actors don't cut lines, and actors don't like it when you cut lines. But Dustin will cut lines. He'll say like, this whole thing, it's starting to sound a little monologue-y, and I don't know, Jack's not really a monologue guy. Let's cut it. And so that was one of the discoveries of working with an actor, is that, especially working with someone like Dustin, he's going to do it his own way, and filtering that through and making sure that nothing became too dialogue-y, that it was a conversation between two real people who, especially the scenes between Dustin and his dad, of course, in the movie, they're father and son, but they're father and son in real life. And so they have this whole history, and they don't always need to say this and then reply with this. They can actually just do it because they're two men who know each other, you know?
Yeah, and for me, like, I would echo both of what John Mark and Dustin said, but like, I don't ever want to go back to writing without an actor because it was so wonderful when I wrote something and I thought it was like I was hitting the mark. You know, Dustin would sometimes be, I can kind of read Dustin now better, you know, than most people, because we've been in the trenches long enough, and I could just see on his face if he didn't agree, and I'd be like, well, what's up? You know, he'd be like, yeah, well, you know, and he'd basically take me through the process of how an actor approaches a scene. And it totally changed how I think about writing dialogue. I've started to teach that in my classes. You know, it's like, think about the person who's inhabiting this character. Like, where are they coming from? Where are they going to? What do they want? Like, you know, ask basic questions that you'd have to ask in order to inhabit the role, and make sure that the scene is obeying that truth, you know? And so we cut a lot of crap, you know, and caught a lot of stuff that may not have gotten caught otherwise. And so it was great.
In the process, which this might be helpful to young filmmakers that maybe are watching this interview, is like, the process that we had in that first weekend at the cabin or whatever was like, who is Jack? Who is Doc? Who is, you know, Dina? Who are these characters? Let's talk them through. What kind of shoes do they wear? What's their hair like? You know, like, even if we cast against whatever type we came up with in that writer's room later, the point was that we all understood this is the type of guy, like, I don't know, if we talk about Harry, you know, John Mark would go on like a paragraph about, you know, what type of gum and tobacco or like what kind of beer he drank or what kind of whiskey he drank or what kind of car he drove, where he sat, you know, if he sat up in the car or he leaned back in the car. We knew all this stuff about these people before we cast the roles, because we talked so much about character before we wrote it, you know?
And sometimes that's the catch, Ben, you know, where you were talking about working backwards from stuff that you have. Sometimes you stumble upon something where this character needs to be this certain kind of a character for the plot to even work. And so many other things you have available to support that. But every once in a while, there's one or two things that you don't have. And one of the things that we didn't have was Harry's car. And we couldn't get it. We're talking to all of we had guys that we called our social capital guys, and they were co-producers or associate producers, I guess. And I would call them, they're like local guys, you know, and who are connected to everybody around here. And I'd call them and say, hey, can you find us this or that? And they'd call all their friends and find it for us. And it was wonderful. It was a great approach, but nobody could find us a muscle car, or what John Mark would call a real camera car. Be like, Russell, we need a real camera car, man. It's gotta, like, it can't be like some little thing that just looks like every other car out there. It's gotta pop on the screen. And he was right. And we all knew he was right. And so we actually, Dustin's father-in-law restores cars. We paid for them to come visit us, you know, their gas and stuff. And Warren, who's a sweetheart, drove it all the way out there and then became our stunt driver. So
and it's you're talking about the production side of things, so that's something I want to get into in a minute. But that was, again, one of the things I really picked up on the second viewing was how fleshed out all the characters felt. And it comes across with what you're saying, that you're thinking about what's the backstory, like you're saying, what gum do they chew, what car do they drive. That really comes out in the film. So I can see the kind of roots of where that's come from. So let's kind of dive into a bit of the production, and we touched on it a bit at the beginning about getting these locations and that side of things. I guess when you're dealing with a smaller crew, what's the kind of best approach that you have for day-to-day shooting, especially when you go into multiple locations as well? Is there a pattern that you follow? Is there some sort of like key advice, that approach that you might use?
Yeah. So we started. Dustin and I applied for a grant this is actually how we got the financing kicked off. We applied for a grant from Western, and the grant was to support students while exploring new techniques in production. And so our new technique that we wanted to explore was to try to do 4 10-hour days a week and have 3-day weekends, 1 day as a production day. That way we would have a day for pickups in an emergency situation, and we had a day to rest and recover for most people. And we had a day to do, production, check in, make sure we're not missing anything for the week. And when you're working with students or up and comers who haven't had a ton of experience cutting their teeth on the long form, features are utterly exhausting and absolutely a mind game. You get halfway through and you start to, just really feel sometimes depressed or overwhelmed or exhausted or, angry about little things, because it's really tough to be in the trenches on a feature. So we experimented with this 4-day, 10-hour day work week, which is, most indie features will do 15-hour days for 6.5 days a week, and so we did the opposite. And while it was imperfect, it definitely improved the process. I don't know if John Mark or Dustin have anything else.
Well, part of what made it possible at such a low budget is that, and we really can't talk about Bruiser without talking about Lenny Walsh, who is a close collaborator with John Mark, and they've made a ton of films together. And we brought him in from LA. He's been a camera op on a ton of stuff and DP, and I believe this was his first feature as a DP, so he was really excited about it, and he knocked it out of the park. And whatever, similar to the three of us, gave his time, for the process, for the project, for the love of it. And that was a huge part of what made it all possible, is when you have that sort of expertise, that level of cinematographer brought in. I don't know. There's other ways that we made it possible on a low budget, but I'll say that was a huge part. So then him being able to then advise our young gaffer, our young master electrician, our, sound mixer, these things was a huge help.
Yeah, another thing about this is one of those things that even as I say it, it doesn't sound right, but it actually is the truth. There are certain things in the filmmaking world that you cannot do without at least a medium-sized crew, because you don't have enough people and you have to do too much in a very short amount of time. And the only way to do that is with more hands. You need literally more hands, more boots on the ground. Mm-hmm. But in indie filmmaking, it's this weird thing where actually there are certain things that you can't do if you have too many people. And so shooting at a hotel that is a running hotel in the middle of a working mountain town, where tourists are coming in and out, and like Harley Davidson rallies are going down the street. If you have too many people, that process itself becomes impossible because there's too many people. And so in indie filmmaking, sometimes less can help you achieve more. And like, again, it doesn't make sense, but it's this weird truth. And so I think Bruiser was like, it was a test capsule for that. Like, can we actually do more if we have less people on set that we have to like house and feed and clothe, and so that, I'm not sure I would have believed it 2 years ago, but I'm a believer now that in indie filmmaking at a certain level, less people can help you do way, way, way more than you ever could have. If you, a 40-person crew, which a 40-person crew you cannot turn that ship easily. When you have 8 people on your crew, that's 2 cars. That's 2 carloads of people, and you can move real quick.
So in relation to that, then, was the times on set where, like you're talking about moving quick, where you thought, okay, something happened perhaps again organically that you thought, right, let's go and try this somewhere else. Let's shift this small crew somewhere else and try something different. Did anything like that happen on set? Taking that silence as a no.
Well, I think that there were. I'm just trying to think of the specific instances. I know that we did do some fairly spontaneous stuff here and there. Dustin, did you?
Yeah, well, I think that one of the things that Russell used to say in pre-production is he would say, this is the kind of movie where if we show up and it's raining, this scene takes place in the rain. And if we show up and it's like hot outside, you know what I mean? And so it's just sometimes on an indie movie, there isn't another day to do it. Like, oh, we'll shoot it next week. You can't do that on a $10,000 movie. On a Batman movie, you can do that. On an indie $10,000 movie, you can't do that. And so Josh's ethos was, if we show up and it's raining, this scene is going to take place in the rain. And that's so there was maybe a little bit of that, but for the most part, when we showed up, we were doing what we were doing.
It was John Mark. That makes me think of like, the first week of shooting, and it was just sneaking up on us, just creeping up on us. And we were like, oh my gosh, first week's here. And we decided to shoot all the Tommy stuff that first week, which was all, the guy who gets bagged in the bathroom or whatever. All that stuff at that mysterious looking house. And we couldn't find that house. And I was like, guys, we can just use my house. And Josh Vowes and John Mark came around. But I remember like once we really looked at it and you and Lenny started thinking about shots, like you guys got amped, and it ended up being like a really solid location. I mean, it's my house. It's a little time capsule of my house at the time, but like it really worked for the scene and for the story. And that was an example of just being like, okay, well, we can just go over there and do it. Let's just do it and see what happens, know?
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, we did also, like, we added the airport. There are just little things that we
lost one airport and went to the other.
Yeah, it wasn't so much like, let's turn the camera over here or let's walk across the street, but it was like 2 or 3 days ahead of time we'd make adjustments because something better came up. And we would adjust to that. We shot the scene where he finds the girl in the trailer and it wasn't working out. We looked at the dailies and we didn't like it, and so we went back and reshot it and absorbed it in our schedule. There are little things kind of like that, but we were pretty methodical and systematic, and our philosophy is that you do your best to make the film in pre-production. You work really hard to make all of your choices, because then your discoveries become very exact. The types of discoveries that you're having in production become very focused. They're not big discoveries that like completely change the narrative. They're very small, focused, detailed discoveries that add richness and texture,
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great insight into production, and I think what's great about what you're talking about is there's some real good tips that hopefully younger filmmakers who do watch this can take away and adapt. I did want to talk a bit about kind of Jack the character, and I guess the themes and overarching story as well. So the way I guess I guess when initially you presented with Jack, you're not quite sure which way to obviously take him, but what we get is this kind of beautiful redemptive arc in the story about it. And one of the scenes that really got me was, Dustin, the one that you had with your dad in the film and in real life, where you're talking about the tiki bar and the swimming pool and all that side of things. What was you kind of thinking about building Jack out to almost be this anti-hero? Because almost that's how I see him. Or have I read that completely wrong?
No. I mean, it's like, it's like that. What is that French New Wave? Breathless, like that guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like you're introduced to this person that's hard to like, and
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think maybe you guys should.
Well, I can talk from the screenwriter's perspective, and I'm sure it'll spark everybody's memory. But yeah, so I feel the same way. That moment that you're talking about, Ben, where they're dreaming together.
Mm.
It's the saddest moment in the film for me.
Yeah.
And it's so sad because that's never going to happen. Like, they have dreams, but it's not for them. Like, we designed the moment to be a moment of intimacy that only takes place in their fantasy version of their lives. And that's what Bruiser is all about. Bruiser is all about the American dream, which no longer exists, really, for almost most everybody. There's the ultra wealthy and there's everybody else, and you kind of are in the class that you're born into. And it's sad to watch a father and son who, the father has to ask the son if he's got a credit card and if he can borrow against it because they're about to lose the place. And then they have this wild dream because Jack's making a small amount of cash every week, and they spend all the money. As John Mark said, they're ultra losers. They spend their money before they even get it in their hands. That was the idea. And so there's this just terrible sadness, in watching them have this dream that is dead before they even can articulate it, I think the beauty is that Jack wakes up to that reality and accepts his fate in the most graceful way possible, whereas his dad doesn't. He continues down that path and it takes him where it takes him.
One of the things about that came through Dustin, really, I mean, we were conceptualizing it, but it happened because of Dustin and the things that he was infusing into the character, is the fact that, first of all, I never think of a character as stupid. I think that's a dangerous road. I never go there, because no one thinks that what they're doing is stupid while they're doing it. You know what I mean? Everyone can justify it, even if their actions are stupid, inherently stupid. There's still a justification there. But what's really the ultimate tragedy with Jack is that Jack has no father figure. His father is like smoking pot and drinking beer and trying to borrow his son's credit card. They have no money, and the money that they don't have, they're trying to spend on tiki bars and stuff. And so Jack's worldview is informed by like Wu-Tang, and that's why he is who he is. And so that's why he believes that like cash rules everything around me, and I got to get everything that I can get, and I got to get as much as I can get while I can get it. And it's me against the world. And if I got to break legs to make it happen, then one way or another, I'm going to get rich or die trying. It's just like, it's all these like rap metaphors.
Yeah.
And that becomes his worldview. And so that's how he rationalizes his antisocial behavior, is because these people are saying, if I can do it this way, then I can achieve this insane level of success that 50 Cent has. But his actions are not based in the reality of someone who's been told that ultimately life is about grace and love and compassion and helping out people who are even more unfortunate than you. You know what I mean? Like, those are good things to do, but he's never had that reinforced. And so he acts stupidly because not because he's stupid, but that because his lighthouse for the world is a stupid thing. He's looking at stupidity, and so he acts stupid. If you only look at Wu-Tang as an example of how to be a good person, you're not going to be a very good person. You're going to be the Ghostface Killer or whatever that guy's name is.
And quite a lot of
I like Wu-Tang, by the way, too. So I'm not backing on Wu-Tang. I don't base my life on like a Wu-Tang song.
No, not at all. No, we're all Wu-Tang here anyway. So no, it's the method, man. I think a lot of what you've been talking about is probably personified in almost like that opening sequence where we're in the kind of motel, and then you pan out and you've got, and forgive me for saying this, but it was like the indie version of the Copa scene in Goodfellas, where you're panning around the motel bit. And I just love that. And you get all these people interacting. It's like you're saying, Josh, about, right, I'm going to give this guy some money, and then he owes me. So, and it's all that side of things. And I think what you're talking about there, that's a lot of what comes across in that opening scene. Was that kind of where your thinking was with that?
I think you just made 3 lifelong friends, is what you
Oh,
just.
really?
You're loving the stuff that we love, you know?
Yeah. Good stuff.
That opening scene was really largely, well, it's a product of all of us, but Dustin, coming from the theater, we had this idea that we decided we wanted to respect all the characters. So this is, in my mind, where it started, is we wanted to respect every tiny little itty bitty character in the film and know them and understand them and give them dignity as a 3-dimensional person. And we knew that if we created that community, because we're pulling from Dustin's like theater ethos of creating a company of actors and thinking of it as a company of actors and making everybody alive and deep and true. And so we wanted to open, with the community, because that frames the world and it frames the characters and it informs all the decisions and sort of the fabric of the movie thereafter. So that's one of our favorite moments, just to be able to set up the plot while sort of like putting our arms around the world of the film and saying, see these guys that you've seen before, you've never gotten too close to them probably, but you've seen them hanging around before. This is our world, and we're going to settle in and get to know them.
Yeah, and and that was the direct reference. Like we did we watched films together, we talked about films together, and so that was one of them. But and then there's obviously Coen Brothers' influence on this project, and others. But we like, I just wanted to point out that there is this like rise above my station energy to it. Like when you're the king of your group of losers or group of whatever motel urchins, how do you when you're at the sort of the top of that food chain, what does it look like to rise above it? And so it's interesting that you guys talk about being so saddened by Jack and his dad's dream. For me, that scene never felt sad. In fact, I don't know. Maybe I always saw it as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I let myself live in the moment of it being possible, and that might be just my actor. But like, what when given this opportunity to rise above, it's that person that says, "Yeah, I'll do it." That's interesting, and that we all want to watch, that anti-hero, that whatever, or making the right decision when presented with the sort of inciting incident of the story, trying to make the right decision even though you don't have the tools to do it.
So we talked a bit about the film. What I do want to get into as well is about, okay, so I'm an indie filmmaker, I've gone out and made my film, what do I do next? And so it'd be interesting to kind of hear your take on almost how you view the festival circuit. How do you then kind of look at getting your film out there to the right people via the right avenue? So I don't know who wants to jump in first with that one.
It's a tough one, but since I was a producer, I guess I'll start. It's hard these days. It's always been hard. But, I think that for us, it was you know, it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe scary to talk about, but we are three white guys, you know, and a lot of films have been made about like white men, you know, and their story. And that doesn't mean that those stories are irrelevant anymore, but we did want to sort of, I don't know, embrace the song of the day. Just we wanted to get behind movements that we're all interested in and worried about on some level. And so, but we have to tell a story that we can tell, you know? And so we did want to talk about immigration, especially in America. And we did want to have something to say about it, because I think in a way, the traditional American dream it's almost like exists in competition with other people getting into the country nowadays. It feels like that, right? Feels like the American dream can only happen if we squeeze it and hold it tight and don't let anyone else near it, you know?
Yeah.
It's like whatever crumbs of American dream are left, we're going to grab them before, you know, brown people get in and take them, you know? And so we wanted to address that honestly and vulnerably as much as we could. And in part because we also knew that that's what the world is looking to. You know, the indie film circuit's always been focused on current events and things that are hard to talk about and going into those brave places. And so we also knew that that's probably where we were most likely going to get attention anyway, you know, and it's a good thing to do. So we kind of focused all that to say, Ben, you don't, from my perspective, it's a mistake to make the film and then look for, you know, for festivals and distribution. You want to kind of look at the market first.
Yeah.
And say, what stories are people interested in? What festivals are out there and what kind of stories are they looking for? And then see where can you authentically fit into that process and into that world, and try to do your best to do that. And so that's what we did. And we have actually captured far more festival interest than I thought we would. It's very hard to get a feature slated at any festival these days. So that seemed to work. And then in terms of distribution, I think it's as tough as ever, if not tougher, to really get the real gatekeepers to take you seriously, because there's a glut of indie films on the market, you know. On the one hand. On the other hand, there's a lot of potential to get on lots of different platforms, and that's easier than it's been in the past, you know. So it's kind of a catch-22. You can get on big platforms and that's good, but you're kind of a needle in a haystack, you know. Yeah. And so to make the jump from like, you know, true indie, you know, to sort of mainstream stuff, you have to get a distributor to want to put marketing dollars into it, you know, and to make you more high profile. And it's yet to be seen if we've done that or not. But I think that the indie filmmaker, in my opinion, should not really be concerned with that. I think the most important thing is to be brave, right? And to be as brave as you can possibly be, and as truthful and honest as you can possibly be, you know, and as, you know, creative and innovative as you can possibly be. And that's going to position you best, not only for the festival circuit, but also to make that jump, you know.
There's some beautiful words there, Josh. Dustin, John Mark, do you want to follow that up with, I guess, your thoughts on kind of your film, how you get it out there, how other indie filmmakers should be kind of operating now?
Dustin? Well, I mean, you know, we're gonna see, I guess. You know, right now I'm just like so pumped to just be with your festival. I've heard great things. This, like, being a part of like this in the early years, building this relationship with you is huge for us. Like, we feel we're celebrating this in a lot of ways. Like, we're celebrating this by this discussion, but we're celebrating it privately and in our own little conversations as well. So, you know, that's huge. We did 3 other festivals. This is I think the third of 4, you know, so I don't know, I guess, yeah, we have some avenues, like none of the doors are completely swung open and saying, come on in, but there are some conversations happening, and we feel optimistic that maybe by the end of 2020, we'll have this on a streaming platform. That's the hope. So it just depends on a couple of upcoming conversations, to be honest, I hope it's okay to say that, Josh.
Yeah, totally. And it could happen sooner. We hope it does. But yeah, we have some very important conversations coming up with people who are higher up in the industry than I've ever had access to. So that's very encouraging. But yeah, I think Dustin, is right. Like Ben, we are so grateful, to be a part of this festival. It's such a good festival. And bizarrely, that last year you took all of our close friend Josh Overbay's film, Luke and Joe, which no connection, right? I mean, you couldn't have known that we knew him. So the fact that you selected Bruiser is so wild and just, interesting. But Overbay, we respect tremendously. He's such a good filmmaker. And so we're honored to sort of, come to the festival that he's been into. And we hope, Ben, that you'll continue to look at our work in the future.
Oh, absolutely. And it was just a very strange way that happened. I think I was just on IMDb and I was looking for something in relation to Bruiser, and I clicked on Dustin's profile. They said Luke and Joe, and I was like, oh, Luke and Joe. And obviously you look completely different in Bruiser than you do in Luke and Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow. And I didn't know whether it was perhaps Josh talking to you and saying, oh, these guys are okay or anything like that, or whether it just happened. And if it did happen just by magic, then I think that's a beautiful thing.
It was magic. I knew, Josh works at Western as well. Josh Overbay does. And so I had helped Josh to, get reimbursement for his flight last year when he came, through the program, things like that. And I'm so bummed that we didn't get to go there, by the way. But so I knew about the festival. I just didn't put together it was the same one. But he just said so many good things about his experience and really, really thought that the world of you, thinks, that you run a tight ship and that the festival is well curated and well attended. And so, those are the festivals everybody's looking to get into.
Yeah.
And so we feel lucky,
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. John Mark, let's just wrap something up with yourself as well. So I guess for you as a director, have we got some kind of closing remarks or advice that you could give to other young indie directors who want to get out there? Because in the end, when you start out, everyone wants to be a director. So what's the kind of advice that you can give to people who want to get out and make a film?
Oh man, I hope I don't get in trouble by saying this.
Don't be a director.
I've been thinking about Ron Howard a lot lately. Ron Howard's been on my mind. I like Ron Howard a lot as a filmmaker, but I've been seeing this commercial on YouTube, and I laugh in Ron Howard's face every time I see this commercial come up, because he says, all you need is a dream and a camera, and you can be a filmmaker too. And the thing is that that is not true. It is in no way is that true at all, because what happens is, if you have one guy and a camera, you can make like an art house film. But to make a feature, you need someone who's in charge of just continuity. Because if you don't have a continuity person, things get really hairy very quickly. And you need multiple people doing multiple things at the same time. And so at a very like underneath basic, at the, like not even the first rung of the step, underneath that is like the Ron Howard thing, like all you need is a dream. But like once you're on the first rung of the ladder, then what you actually need is a team. You have to be able to find like-minded artists who are really serious about getting really serious about a very difficult, complex thing that has multiple layers and will take 2 years. if you want to get it done in less than 2 years, you can. And so it's one for the $10,000 movie. I know it seems like a drop in the ocean, but the truth is that even at something that small, by the way, it's not small, but it's something that small at the micro budget level. What you really need is, like, nice to have a dream, got to have that first, but then you have to have team building skills. And you have to know how to not cuss people out so they don't want to work with you anymore. And you have to know how to keep that hotel location, how to make sure that those people feel respected for 2 weeks. Because if you get 1 week of your movie in the can and you piss off the hotel staff and they say, forget it, we don't want the money, don't come back next week, you're tearing up our place, you're interrupting our business, and then you've got one half of the movie shot and you can't shoot the other half. Do you see how problematic that would be? It would be it would destroy the project. It would sink it like a battleship. And so my advice to indie filmmakers is watch a lot of Ron Howard movies. He's great. But second, start building your team, because that's how you get the movie made. You can't do it by yourself. You have to have other people. And if you could make a movie with just you, and the lighting was just going to magically be there, and the sound was going to magically be there, and there was magically going to be actors and a great screenplay, you would still make a terribly boring movie, because every decision you would make would be indulgent. There's no one else there. Iron sharpens iron. There's no one else there to say, here's a stronger way to do that. Here's a cleaner way to do that. Here's a much simpler way to do that. We don't need 3 shots to tell that story. We can do it in 1 shot, and here's why that's stronger. And that's what collaboration is. And that's what filmmaking is. Multiple people doing multiple things in a very short amount of time.
And I think very much that's what your conversation has demonstrated here, how you did pull it together. So no, I think that's fantastic advice. It's one of these scenarios where I feel I could carry on chatting with you about Ron Howard and Wu-Tang all night, but I will wrap it up, because in the end, I think the people who watch this probably don't want to hear us talking about Wu-Tang and Ron Howard all night. So
we'll get our beers and we could do another call.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But from my perspective, I'm absolutely honoured and delighted to be screening Bruiser this year. It might sound like I'm kind of placating you a bit, but Bruiser probably has been one of my favourite films of the year. That being said, I haven't been out to the cinema all that much this year. So.
We'll take it.
I'm taking it. I'm taking it home, putting that one in the bank.
Put it in the bank.
That's right.
but honestly, it was the very first film that we had submitted that probably within 20 minutes I thought, this is in, and you submitted quite early on, and that was honestly my thought process. It was in, and that was that, and it almost didn't matter whether we had Paul Thomas Anderson or Christopher Nolan submitted. It was that sort of feeling for me. So from my perspective, thank you so much for submitting. I'm absolutely looking forward to screening Bruiser, and thank you very much as well for joining me and chatting through the film as well.
You're welcome.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Ben. This was awesome.
Pleasure. Yeah.